Hello, and welcome back to Under the Blanket Book Reviews, the coziest book review show on the internet. I'm your host, Josh. Today, we are going to be reviewing a pretty classic book, a pretty seminal book in the otaku world sphere, and this is The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. Now, you probably know this as an anime series. The Melancholy of Haruhi tongue twister here. Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya is one of the most, renowned, popular, classic anime of all time. So, if you're an otaku in any sense, you've probably heard of this series. But you probably didn't know that it is indeed based on a book series by the author Nagaru Tanigawa. Before watching the show, I did not know that. I thought it was an original story as a TV show. But alas, it is actually based on this book series. And thank you. I want to give a special shout out to my friend Vinny. Vinny, if you're watching this, thank you for loaning me this book so I could read it. I know it's been like a year since you loaned it to me, but I finally got around to reading it. Long story short, I left it in the place I wasn't staying at, and finally I'm back in the place where I did leave it, so I was able to finish this up. Yeah, and I will give my thoughts. So, I really enjoyed the show. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I think the movie, The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, which covers one of the later books, 3 or 4, 5, one of those books in the series, I think that's a masterpiece. The show itself was very enjoyable, very good. I loved the characters, but I wouldn't say it was like a masterpiece by any means. And I have the same take on this first book here. It was good. Was it great? I don't know. So here's the thing. Light novels, when they get translation in English, are rough. I read the first 2 Kagura Days books, I believe, and those were really, really bad. And I knew right then and there it was probably like a translation issue. That the translation makes it very simplistic language, very rough language. And I'm going to say that, give it the benefit of the doubt and say that's probably the case, and not blame Nagaru Tanigawa, without knowing, Japanese and being able to read that. The prose in this book is incredibly simplistic and basic to the point of boringness. Now, I think when prose is very dry and using too much fanciful language, it can be very boring and stale. And I think this is the inverse of that, where it uses too much simplistic, basic language. But, however, I will give it some credit because it also loans itself that way to the protagonist, whose POV we are experiencing the story through, Kion. Because Kion is a high school boy, in every sense of the generic high school boy. He's not a popular jock, he's not a nerdy loser, but he's like the most average run-of-the-mill high school kid. But in every way, including being a misogynistic asshole. And, who gets, okay grades. So I think, the language itself being from his POV kind of, gives me a little bit of forgiveness there. I'm like, okay, kind of makes sense that this is all from Kion's perspective, so maybe that's why the language is so simple, because he's a simple person being thrust into this world of science fiction and fantasy chaos. And I think that, sort of adds to the vibe, if you will. But yeah, I will say, in the sense of Kion being the protagonist, I will warn you, if you're planning on reading this book or watching the show, the protagonist is not Haruhi, as you might think. Haruhi is one of the core characters, and a lot of the narrative centers around Haruhi. However, the protagonist is Kion. And this isn't a spoiler, because it's the first episode, first chapter. Obviously, it's Kion's perspective. And Kion is an asshole. Kion is a dick. He has a lot to learn, and I do believe he goes on a character arc during the show and into the movie, The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, which, by the way, if you've watched the show and haven't seen that movie, you're, not done with the show. Go watch the movie. But, I know a lot of people that have done that, and it's, that's crazy to me. Anyway, so yeah, but Kion does have a character arc, not so much so in this book. A little bit, but not so much into this book. I know it's a long series, so obviously he's gonna have more development as the books progress, but so I will say that just from the foreknowledge I have from the show, but I will warn you, if you don't like misogynistic asshole protagonists, and you want to stay as clear from that as possible, I would avoid reading this book. But yeah, the ensemble cast of characters in this book is so great. And I know where they go, all of their character arcs from the show, of course. But my personal favorite is Yuki Nagato. So, but like Koizumi, like Asahina, they're all so great. Haruhi herself. This ensemble cast of characters is just so fun and so lovable. And you just want to keep reading. You just want to keep reading, and I'm planning on reading the rest of the series at some point. Just because I just want to keep having fun adventures with these characters, you know? It is another high school book, and I know how I've talked about how sick I am of high school books, but I give this is an exception, because it's one of, like, those OG quintessential high school books, you know, that came out in the early 2000s, I believe. Might have been the late 90s, early 2000s, I think, though. It's like from that era when it was like not overdone and like totally ruined by that point. This is one of the classics, so you can't really like blame the classics for a trope that's incredibly overdone today, you know. So this is one of those classic high school stories. Yeah, I would say, like, just to give a base summary of the story if you're interested. So it goes through this like everyday everyman Kion. He meets this girl in his class named Haruhi Suzumiya, who's this eccentric, crazy-ass, like, she's very pretty, but she's this eccentric, crazy-ass, batshit insane girl that's obsessed with, like, supernatural stuff. She's obsessed with, specifically, time travelers, aliens, and espers. And the bit of the story, and this isn't really a spoiler, is that, all these things are happening around her. Like, all these different types of entities, are happening all around her. And Kion is becoming privy to them and realizes what's going on. But for different reasons in each case, Haruhi isn't able to know. So it's Haruhi going on these, like, dragging Kion on these batshit insane adventures to try to find these types of creature, like mystical beings. Yet they're all around her the whole time and she doesn't realize. And it's a comedy. It's a comedy. Science fiction comedy. And it's just so much fun, you know, like, as shitty, as, like, kind of shitty and bland as the prose is, and as kind of frustrating and outdated the main character is and the environment is, it is such a fun read and such a light, breezy read, and the show is just so much fun as well. And if you're looking for a fun time, you gotta give this book a shot. It's just like, if you're looking for a relaxing, fun read. Like, there's not really much, like, drama and tension. There is some, but, like, for the most part, it's just pure fun. And that's why I would say it's worth reading, you know? Like, even despite the bland, shitty light novel prose, it is still worth the ride. And so I would give it a recommendation. Yeah, and that is my review.